Hello.
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 Can you
How
hear
are
me?
you doing?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. All good.
Good.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
We have 14 participants,
I
I can see.
know. Very nice. Thank you for joining everybody who's got up so early in the UK on a bank holiday to join. And thanks to Isabel for joining us. Today we have Isabel Ender. She is the head of conservation strategy for the Manta Trust, and she's going to be talking about how we can protect manta and devil rays globally and what's been done so far. So I'm really excited for this talk. As always, if you haven't joined before, I'll just tell you the technical information. This webinar will last around 40 minutes. Isabel's going to give a presentation and then we'll take questions. So if you have any questions at any time, please put them in the Q&A box, which is on the Zoom toolbar. And we'll try and get through as many of these as we can at the end of the webinar. Okay, over to you, Isabel.
Yay. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, perfect.
Share and make this big.
Okay, this looks good.
Does that, yeah?
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Perfect.
Well, thank you everyone for being here, for getting up early in the UK, and for staying up after work if you're over my side of the world. I'm in Australia. And I'm going to be talking about saving the devils. So, as Fossey said, my name is Isabel Ender, and I'm the Manta Trust Head of Conservation Strategy. So, manta rays are probably some of the most incredible animals that you can see underwater. I think every encounter with a huge animal in nature is always special, but I don't know, there's just something about being underwater, being in this different world, and having one of these majestic rays just come swim up to you and be so curious. And you can just see there's something looking at you. There's some sort of intelligence, there's some sort of spirit. And it's just moments that you don't forget. It's very, very special. And when I first saw my manta ray, my first manta ray, it just immediately made me realize, I was like, these are amazing. I need to do something in my life to make sure they continue to exist in our oceans. And I think I'm probably not the only one here. So people all over the world love to swim with manta rays and spend a lot of money to do that. Manta tourism is worth about 140 million US dollars every year. But unfortunately, mantas and their smaller cousins, the devil rays, are threatened from an increase in both targeted fishery as well as bycatch, which is sort of the accidental fishery in nets when they're not being the targets. And images such as these ones have become more and more common on fish markets all over the world. And that is primarily driven by an increase in demand for their gill plates. Now, if you can see over here, this is a manta ray. You can see these are the gill plates of the manta rays. That's what a manta ray uses to filter plankton out of the water. And then it swallows it down here through its little mouth. And devil rays, which have a mouth a little bit underneath rather than in the front, they also have gill plates all around here. And so both manta and devil ray gill plates are really sought after as traditional Asian medicines. So when they're dried, they'll look a little bit like this. This is one of the devil ray gill plates. And that increase in demand has really spiked the targeted fishery for these species in the last 15 years or so. And so the Manta Trust was formed in 2011 to conduct research, education, and awareness that would help to protect manta and devil rays around the world. And from very humble beginnings in the Maldives, we've grown to now have a network of projects in over 20 countries worldwide. When I first joined the Manta Trust in 2014, it was actually really good timing because we had a global strategy workshop in South Africa where we brought a lot of the experts from all around the world together to hatch a plan on what we can do to try to protect these species, because we're getting really worried about the numbers that we were seeing at the fish markets, the declines that were being recorded. And we developed, we published a paper on that workshop. And based on that, we developed the Manta Trust Global Mobility Conservation Program, which is the program that I've been leading for 5 years. And that was funded by the IUCN Save Our Species, the Save Our Seas Foundation, and the Shark Conservation Fund. So initially, what our aims was to focus really on research, education, and engagement. So we wanted to, first of all, make sure that some of the devil ray species receive an updated listing on the IUCN Red List, because the data that was on there was out of date, and it wasn't reflecting the level of threat and decline that was actually happening. Another goal that we had was to get both manta and devil ray listed on the Convention for Migratory Species, which is an international convention between governments around the world to protect species that are crossing their borders within their waters. So to sort of come up with some collaborative actions for that. And then also get the devil rays to get a listing onto CITES Appendix 2, so that they have equal protection just like the manta rays do. So CITES is probably the most important one out of all of these, because it's the Convention for International Trade of Endangered Species. So it manages the trade, the international trade. And as I mentioned before, trade was sort of what was driving that increase in fisheries. So when you get a species listed on Appendix 2, it doesn't mean that you can't trade at all. It just means that if you're wanting to trade any product of that animal, you've got to be able to show that it's not having a detrimental impact on the population. So you need a lot of data to support that. And you need to basically go through quite a rigorous framework to provide evidence that it is okay to take that one gill plate, which is really tricky to do. And so it's a really good way of starting to halt, or at least majorly reduce the trade that's happening. So initially what we then set out was to gather as much data as we could on the manta and devil ray fisheries all around the world, and also any declines that we could find, and consolidate a global network of NGOs and researchers and anyone else that wanted to sort of join into the coalition to present a unified voice to the governments, so that then the governments could represent that at the various conventions. We also aim to educate governments and policymakers, as well as communities, about the threats that these species were facing, so that they were aware of their status, and provide some training to improve the fisheries and trade monitoring, and also raise awareness about the threats to mobilids among the general public. So this is some of the very initial simplistic data that we managed to gather. So we sort of did a deep dive into everything we could find in terms of what do we have in terms of publications, published literature, and then what do we have that is maybe not published, that is literature that was or data that was collected by fisheries organizations, by independent researchers that never saw the light of the day in a publication. But that was really important for what we were trying to achieve. So we reached out through every possible source that we could around the world, and started to gather all that data and put it all together. And what we found was quite sobering, was that there was actually both target and bycatch fishery all over the world on these species. And some of the declines were really dramatic. So in some places in Indonesia, they'd recorded 77 to 99% decline in landing, so in what was being landed on the fish markets when it comes to mobulid rays. One of the challenges that people have faced is that it's really hard to identify between the species. Even for the experts, it is hard. So not just between what is a manta ray and what is a devil ray, but also sort of the individual devil ray species. So what we did, which took a number of years, was to figure out what are the specific traits that you can use to identify between the various species. And so I actually have that one here, Guide to the Manta and Devil Rays of the World, so you can purchase that. But that's basically a resource that we've given to governments and to fisheries organizations to improve their data collection, and also anyone that's interested in these animals. There's a little bit of it just on the animals in general, which is just a really nice little book to have. And then a major focus of our first couple of years was on communication and education. So primarily targeted at governments, at delegates, and decision makers. So we produced a whole range of materials for the various pre-convention meetings and at the convention. So such as these brochures, Devils in Distress, some leaflets, some we talked to the media, we did some social media work as well to raise awareness. we brought a lot of the researchers back together for the second Global Mobilid Symposium so we could share our knowledge on the species. Guy Stevens, the founder of the Manta Trust, also produced a beautiful Manta book, which is more like a coffee table book, but also just a really nice resource to have to get a bit more of an understanding of what are those species and why are they so special and why are they so threatened. And then one of the sort of funnest things, I guess, that we did together with my colleague Danny was produce a campaign in virtual reality film prior to the CITES convention. So that was the CITES convention where we wanted the devil rays to get the same level of protection as manta rays. And so we had a lot of the data in our brochures, we had the evidence in the documents, but we just thought it'll be really important to build that emotional connection for the people that are coming to the conference. So there's thousands of government delegates from all over the world coming to these conventions. And many of them have never seen these animals. Many of them have maybe never even been in the water. So what we thought would be amazing would be to bring the animals to the conventions through a virtual reality experience. So Danny and his team went out to the Azores to visit Ana Sobral's project, and Ana's done a webinar already, so you can look that one up. And filmed an amazing movie with her, which we then showed at the CITES COP, which was incredibly well received. So the campaign is called Love Mini Mantas, and you can watch the whole movie if you Google it after my talk, not right now, but I'll just show you quickly just some sections of it here. So imagine seeing this in virtual reality and having mobile rays, these are devil rays, swim all over you, and it's just absolutely incredible. It's like I was trying it out while we were at the COP, and I just didn't want to take my headset off anymore because this is just so much nicer than being in a convention center. And it really brought it, I think, brought it home. So yeah, watch it after my talk. So then 2 years on down the road, we were incredibly proud that because of all the amazing work of our partners, our researchers, our NGO collaborators, everyone around the world that had worked with us, we had actually achieved what we set out to do. So down here in 2014, the government of Fiji was the one that proposed Manta and devil rays for inclusion on CMS Appendix 1 and 2. So that got through. So it's very happy me and Daniel over here. And then in 2016, devil rays got listed on CITES Appendix 2. You can see all of us over here very happy as well. And in 2016, we also got the Manta and the devil rays part of the CMS Sharks MOU agreement. So that's giving some more concrete guideline to the CMS parties on what they can do to implement protection. So that was amazing, and as well as the red listing that got updated, but it's worth nothing if it's not being implemented effectively, right? So the following 2 years, we really focused on supporting implementation. So making sure that all these sort of legislative changes were actually filtering down into real changes on the ground. And that came down a lot to building capacities of government. So we need to make sure that people that work in the tax and customs office know how to identify when they see a product of a manta ray in front of them, right? Most of the time it'll be a gill plate. And so what we did was a lot of building capacities on identifying the various products, as well as what is the paperwork that needs to happen, what is the legislative procedure for still allowing trade to happen within CITES. And then also looking at starting to dip our toes into building capacities within communities by firstly doing some research on what are some potential alternatives that could lead communities away from being dependent on mobilid fishery. And it's a huge topic. So that's why I'm just saying dipping our toe into this. Another objective for that second phase was to support policy changes, this time not on an international level, but on a regional, as well as on a local level in key fishing countries. And that really requires some more in-depth data on the mobilid fishery biology and ecology. And then finally develop a 5-year plan for the Manta Trust so we could continue working as a charity. So some of the resource material that we developed was a field ID guide on and how to distinguish between the different gill plates of manta rays and devil rays so that you know what's in front of you. And we did that through a series of workshops. and then also giving some guidance on to what does that CITES legislative procedure mean. So it means basically that countries that still want to trade in the product have to develop something called a non-detriment finding, and that requires certain steps on gathering the right kind of data. And it sounds very confusing at first. It's really not that confusing, but if you don't have someone talk you through it, it is confusing. And so that was part of our workshops basically as well. And we did that working together in collaboration with a lot of the other NGOs that we formed that coalition with. So most of the time it was the Pew Charitable Trust, Humane Society International, IFOR, and a couple of others. So we sort of just joined up forces and ran these workshops all over the world. And most of the one that was sort of across Southeast Asia, I joined and did some of the training. Here you can see our guide being used by some of the delegates. And the Pew Charitable Trust sort of pulled together this graphic showing that over the years, we've had over 70 governments around the world that have participated in our workshops to ensure that the trade in sharks and rays listed on Appendix 2 is legal and sustainable. So these workshops were sort of joined, focused on the devil rays, but also on all the shark species that had received CITES listing. So looking at also supporting policy changes on a regional and national level, what we did is look at initially the regional fisheries management organization. So there's the RFMOs, and the one in the sort of Atlantic here, in the Pacific, the IATTC, they had some sort of measures on what to do if they accidentally caught a moblet ray in the net. So they had some safe release guidance, and so we were sort of pushing on getting other FMOs to adopt that as well, because that was sort of the first step on trying to improve what's happening there. And then also Mario Malley was leading a study looking at in more depth where the trade routes are actually coming from. So what are the dynamics of where the countries that are mostly where the gill plates are being sourced from, which was really important data for us to have as well. And so based on that, we focused our attention on a couple of key fishing countries that were sort of identified as being big players in the trade, and monitoring their fisheries, as well as some socioeconomic drivers in a little bit more detail. So doing interviews with the fishermen, as well as getting out and about and collecting a lot of data, seeing a lot of dead animals. I know I promised I was going to show you pretty pictures, but I'm just realizing it's a lot of dead animals. I'm sorry. There will be pretty ones later. And for this work, actually, what was great was that sometimes we would actually start involving some of the fishermen in our work, and some of the local researchers would start to team up with us, which is a really nice way of starting to build the capacity within the communities. And I've set up a collaboration with James Cook University here in Australia. So we've had a couple of master students look through our data and help us write up the results from all these monitoring efforts that we've had. So one of them is out, that was published this year. Another one's going to be out hopefully soon. So you can read up on this as well. And then in 2017, there was another CMS COP in the Philippines, which was really focused around the theme of alternative livelihoods. So their future is our future. And so we thought we'd sort of narrow that down a little bit more, and the Manta Trust and WCS together proposed a concerted action for moblet rays. So that's some more concrete actions that countries can do that are surrounding the challenges of working with the communities on transitioning away from moblet fisheries, as well as having a bit more of a smooth change in socializing any legislation. And again, we worked with a master student, for example, in Peru, who was doing some research on looking at sort of what were the motivations for compliance and some potential alternatives within the fishing communities there. And I think that was probably like one of the most rewarding aspects of this work, besides obviously being in the water and swimming with manta ray, was just getting out and meeting these very different communities, very different people from I guess what us Westerners are used to in our daily life, and hearing their stories and getting to know them, and really connecting on a level that's very unique, I guess, because of this research. We weren't there as tourists; we were there to really listen and understand, and form some really wonderful friendships as well. So that was a very, very special part, I think, of this work. Now, tourism is sometimes quoted as a potential alternative to fisheries, and it is in some places an alternative, but it's always got to be done sustainably. And so to be able to support that, we also teamed up with Project Aware, WWF, and the Manta Trust, as well as a scientific advisory team and industry experts, to produce a best practice guide for shark and ray tourism. So that's available on each one of our websites. And here's again the reference if you want to look it up. And then also within the Manta Trust, we developed how to swim with manta rays video and some guidelines that tourism operators can use in various languages. And that's sort of giving a little bit of an introduction on what to do, what not to do. And again, that was based on Annie's PhD in the Maldives, on a lot of the research that we'd been doing over there as well. So then it came to 2018, and we kind of had to bring it all together because our funding was starting to come to an end, and we needed to come up with that 5-year plan, and we needed to kind of bring it all together, bring that global strategy together, bring the global mobility program together, and hatch out, so where are we going next? What are the critical next steps to do? And we work with some amazing people to produce that. And then at the end of 2018, we published the Global Strategy and Action Plan on conserving mobile rays. And then my colleague Bex and I got to launch that at the Sharks CMS meeting in Monaco. And basically, it gives you a little bit more of an overview of the various threats that we've identified, and then some very detailed steps on sort of how can we flip those threats and address them, and make sure that we're eliminating or reducing them, and what part of this whole picture, what activities can the Manta Trust play. So it's a really great document that you can download from our website. And as part of that also, I guess we have a more sophisticated version of that initial what's happening in the world view with mantas and devil rays. So we've really sort of pulled the data together on where do we still have some major fisheries or bycatch, and also what are the countries that are reported to sell gill plates, what are the countries that are benefiting from manta tourism, and then sort of bringing it all together to identify what are some of the priorities that we should be focusing on over the next few years to move forward. And you can see from this analysis, Indonesia was one of the countries that really sort of stood out as being sort of a high threat, but also a high opportunity for our work. So we did get some funding to do more work in Indonesia as part of this, which is led by my wonderful colleague, Betty. And she's looking at reducing mobile fisheries mortality and building capacity to implement CITES at a national, provincial, and local level, as well as look at sort of what could be some practical solutions to reduce bycatch. Because even if you sort of say that you're not allowed to catch mobilids by targeting them, a lot of them still get caught as bycatch. And so she's looking at some sort of post-release mortality, some tagging research as well. So there'll be some really exciting stuff, I think, coming out of this project in the next few years. And then Josh Stewart and a whole bunch of other people also published a paper in 2018 on the research priorities that are needed to support effective manta and devil ray conservation. So what is it that we still don't know that could be really helpful to protect these animals going forward? So it's a nice read for you guys as well. And most of the data, most of the publications, especially the recent ones, are listed on our website. So you can just go onto the Manta Trust and look them up, click on them, and then read what people have been finding out all around the world. And yeah, so that takes me to the end of my presentation. And I have to say, I couldn't thank everybody that I've worked with enough for just this amazing journey, and the most inspiring people that I've met, that were my colleagues, that were people I've met at conferences, that just it's been an incredible journey, and I've loved it every single day. And thank you so much to our funders for making it possible for us to do this work as well. And thank you very much to you for listening, and it's time for questions.
Hi, thank you so much. That was super interesting. I love hearing about the VR, because we use that in the Maldives now. Danny actually made a film.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Maldives film?
I don't think I've seen the Maldives one, no, but I knew that he was doing one for you guys there, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. He did it in Hanifaru, and there's like chain feeding mantas, and then there's a whale shark goes past, and
Oh my God.
we use it at all the festivals and with all the kids now, and they like
Yeah.
love it. We'll have like queues and queues of screaming kids, and they've never seen mantas before, and
Oh my God,
I
I
think
would be screaming.
it's such a cool tool to engage people. So yeah,
Yeah.
really exciting. All right, we have a question here from Sonia. Sonia would like to know, what are the things you look for when you're comparing the pros and cons of sustainable tourism versus sustainable fishery? Quite a big question.
Well, I mean, sustainable fishery depends on the species. Like something like a manta ray, you cannot sustainably fish it because it just reproduces so slowly. So I guess it's not really so. It's like comparing apples and oranges here. So there are some fish and potentially some shark species that you can fish sustainably, but when it comes to species like manta rays, they take a long time to mature. They only have one young every couple of years and not many through their lifetime. It's really like any level of fishery will be unsustainable, to be quite honest. So I guess the question is just, is tourism an option? Because sometimes, yes, you might have mantas around, like for instance in the Maldives, they get landed on the fish markets, but you can't really swim with them because they're a bit too offshore, and it's just not feasible in terms of logistics. And same in Peru, we've been looking into that, and it's just a little bit too hard, basically because of visibilities, because of unpredictability and everything. So it's not so much sort of the pros and cons, it's just what is a realistic option for the species and for the location as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking to Betty the other day, who you
Uh-huh.
were mentioning, and she works in Indonesia, and she was saying it's really hard sometimes to say, oh, we can just provide tourism initiatives, because tourism isn't always an option. So in these
Mhm.
places where tourism isn't an option, what kind of alternative livelihoods would you recommend?
So what we are working on, for instance, in Eastern Indonesia through Sarah Lewis's project, is looking at, so they're doing a bit of aquaculture as an alternative for the women. They're actually, because it's not just finding alternatives for the fishermen, it's kind of finding alternatives for the household, for the family, right? And so we're also looking at weaving, so weaving tapestry and producing some other I guess, items that could be sold to tourists in Bali. And then also looking at sort of what are the other things that these communities actually want to do, right? Like it's not just, oh, this is realistic, you should be doing it, but like what are maybe things that they want to get into. So it's yeah, thinking a little bit out of the box sometimes, and it's a process that you have to do jointly. It cannot go one way or the other way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Very useful.
Mhm.
We have a question here. If mobulas are now on CITES, so they can't be traded internationally without certificates, why is there still a big gill plate industry?
Because there's still a lot of illegal trading.
Okay.
Basically is the answer. And because it's also still like, I mean, it's hard to be the police everywhere all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's I'm not just saying everyone's doing the wrong thing, but sometimes it's also just measures might not be in place. Like it's you can't change the world overnight just because something got listed. Like that's why it's been taking us years to work on implementing the policy, and then also it'll take more years to be able to really show the changes that have been happening. Um, so it's yeah, they're still being traded because technically you are allowed as long as you can show the evidence that it's not having a detrimental effect. But also, um, if it's not being recognized, if it's not being sort of checked properly, but there's definitely still trade. Like we know that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. A bit of a lighter one now from Jenny. She's saying you've obviously traveled a lot. What's your favorite location that you've traveled to with your work?
It's my word. Oh my God. I actually, oh gosh, it's hard. So I mean, Ecuador was amazing when we went for the CMS COP, the first one. I guess that was because it was just in the beginning as well. And it was, everything was just so exciting for me, like meeting everybody and getting my head around it. And then, you know, being able to go and spend a bit of more time in the country. And we traveled down to Peru to visit our project there and spend a couple of weeks actually helping them on the fish markets and meeting some of their communities. It was just, yeah, that was the favorite one as part of this work. But then also I've done a couple of other things with Manta Trust that weren't part of the global mobility program. So for instance, we did a short research study in Palau. And so that was amazing, going to Palau, my God. So like there's so many amazing places I've went to, like all with Manta Trust. So I'm incredibly grateful. I've seen a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I bet you've had the best experiences. What's the best experience you've had with a manta or a devil ray?
I think so the first time I actually saw an oceanic manta ray. So like oceanic manta rays are like mini buses. They are huge. And there's not many places in the world that you can easily see them. And I had actually never seen one until I went to Peru. And we were looking at sort of, oh, would it be possible to swim with them, because they come down from Ecuador and the water's quite murky, and it's sort of like there's no reef, so you just go out and try to like go with a little fishing boat around the oil rigs and hope for mantas. And I mean, we were lucky, so we jumped in, and like there was just this milky broth, and all of a sudden there was this huge face that just came towards me and just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was like, oh my God, it's gonna eat me, because it was just so huge. And I think just it's like, because I'd never seen an oceanic one, it just looked so wild. It just looked really different than the reef mantis. Like it's just, the skin was different, the markings were different, everything about it was just so wild. And just being out there in that milky broth of Peru's sea, not knowing what's out there, it was really cool. Like I think I mean, I've had a lot of amazing, beautiful encounters with manta rays, sort of, you know, somersaulting and coming really close and looking at you. But that one was just like, I would never forget that one.
That's really cool. I love it when
really
it's
awesome.
unexpected. It's
oh gosh, yeah.
I first saw oceanics, and actually the only place I've seen them is in Formula in the south of the Maldives. Have you been there?
Oh, I want to go there. No, I've never been.
It's really cool. And they were so curious. That's what shocked me the most. Like they would come and circle you, and you'd be diving and they'd just come up the blue and be all around you. And I'm like, oh
wow. No, I really want to go there. Yeah,
you've got to make it there. All the big stuff. All right. We have one from Valerie. Valerie says, hi, regarding the gill plate trade, are there any outreach or education efforts going on in demand countries such as China?
Yes. So that has been a huge part of the work that's happened, but that was something that was really sort of taken aboard by WildAid. So that's why I didn't include it in this, but it is actually, when you're looking through the overall strategy, that was a huge element of it, but that wasn't something that Manta Trust has expertise in. So that was, WildAid has done a huge consumer campaign across all the big Asian markets, basically with billboards and TV ads and all sorts of things on trying to sort of raise awareness that sort of, I guess it's not sustainable, and also just it's not a good thing to do that. So that's been running for that was running for a couple of years while we were doing all the other work, and that was sort of, I guess, always like a counterpart to our work, but something that we left the experts to do, because they are really big, like WildAid is like media experts. So they did all sorts of movies and worked with sort of like Asian celebrities as well on doing like short clips on public service announcement and all sorts of things. So so WildAid, if you look up WildAid, they should have like loads of information. I just didn't put that into this presentation because I had so much already.
So much to talk about. Is that other campaigns that were featured in Racing Extinction?
So Racing Extinction was not part of that initial campaign, but it's also linked with WildAid and with Sean Heinrich. So it's kind of the same people having their fingers in this. But Racing Extinction was not just focused on mantas and devils. It was focused on a whole range of species, but yes, it was a component of it as well.
Because I know at the end they had all the buildings with the projections.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
But I guess it was the Racing Extinction team actually. But that's super cool. Okay, cool. We've got one here from Simone. She's asking if mantas can survive if they've been caught in nets and released.
Well, that is the question that we're trying to find out, because some of the data is showing that some of them survive, but a lot of it is sort of pointing towards it not really being a sort of a real alternative, I guess, in saying as long as you safely release them, it's okay to have them caught in the nets. So there's some data, which is part of what Betty, I guess, is looking in Indonesia. There's been some data, some research in New Zealand as well on post-release mortality, because essentially, when you think about it, like it obviously depends also on how long they've been in the net and how stressed they got, and then also how they were handled when they're being pulled up, right? So all of that has an influence on the likelihood of them surviving or not. But what, like, we can't say for sure, but what it's looking like, there's only like a small percentage, I guess, that are really thriving once they're being released. And that is why we're looking into what could be other alternatives to reduce bycatch. So there's some research starting to happen with putting different nets and sort of, I guess, electromagnetic repellent on the nets that the manta rays can sense, but the target species cannot. And then also looking at some other options that can be done by basically just not going to the hot spots of the mantas, if possible, during certain times of the year, if you can fish somewhere else, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. And is that all research that you're involved in?
No, that's kind of what's happening with various people across the world. So because we initially formed that big network of reaching out to everyone, and I kind of still know a little bit of what everyone's up to. So I'm not directly involved with it. I know that the company that was looking into the lights and the electromagnetic repellents, they done like a pilot study in Indonesia, and they wanted to do a second one in Peru, but that's on hold just because of COVID. But that's something that we're keen to look into. And also looking at what, when you're looking at that, it's not just, is it effective, but could it be something that is realistically adopted by the communities, by the fishermen as well? Like, is this something that's extraordinarily expensive so no one will ever use it? Or is this something that can be sold to a government to give as a subsidy to their fishers or something like that? So there's going to be some work happening, but it's kind of on hold right now. And in terms of what's happening elsewhere in the world, I need to brush up a little bit on what people are doing.
Sounds like you're pretty in the know, I think. Okay, cool. We've got one from Ariana. She says, thanks for such an interesting talk. And are these identification guides available somewhere?
Yes, I think the ID guides, are on the Manta Trust website.
Yeah, you can find them on the
right?
website. Yeah, you can find the links to purchase them on another website, I think.
Yeah. So the ID guides, if you're talking about the book, that one you have to buy because it's like a really nice book. But if you're just looking at the guides, the little brochure we made for the governments on identifying gill plates when they're dried lying in front of you, that one's freely available, but I don't think that'll be interesting for normal people.
Maybe for people as manta obsessed as us.
I know.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I hope that's helpful, Ariana. Right, I think we'll have just one more question. So this is another one from Sonia. She's asking what your favorite species of mobulid is.
Oh God. I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite species, because I've seen a range of them, and some of the ones I saw in Mexico are like tiny. They are so cute. They're like little, and in Peru as well. And then you get others that are huge, that are as big as a reef manta, and they're all amazing. Some are like olive colored, others are black, and they're just, I can't say. They're all pretty cool.
We get so excited when we see a devil ray in Hanifaru, and it looks tiny compared to all the big mantas, and people are like, all the tourists are shouting like baby manta, baby manta. I'm like, no, it's baby manta, but so cute. And then sometimes they'll kind of run into the feeding chain, and then they'll kind of realize they're like, there's all these big things around me, and they'll freak out and come off. And they have long tails as well. Okay, cool. We have one really nice comment here from Harrison, who's been watching a few of our webinars. He said he just wants to say thank you for everything that you're doing to save manta rays.
Oh, thank you.
And I just wanted to ask you as well what we've been asking everyone, sorry, about your favorite book or publication that you would recommend about the natural world.
So there's loads obviously out there, but the one that I've always really loved ever since before I even got involved with the Manta Trust, it's the Save Our Seas Foundation magazine, and I happen to have one here as well. So these ones, I mean, I get the printed ones now because I guess I've moved up the rank, but you can get the electronic ones online for free, and they're really cool. They're just like, they're really inspiring sort of magazines that come out every couple of months about just people doing amazing work on shark and rays and whale and cetaceans now as well all over the world. And it's just always inspired me, like you just sort of take it out for an evening or an afternoon of reading and just seeing what all these people are doing, and it just sort of inspires you to just know that lots of really cool stuff's happening in the world. So it's a magazine I really like to read, so I can highly recommend it.
The imagery is amazing as well. It's like, it's more like a coffee table book, the one that you actually get in print. It's nice. We used to get them at our university like environment center, and then like every 6 months or so there'd just be a big pile of them, and they'd go within like the morning. Everybody loved them. Okay. Cool. Thank you so much, Isabel. That was super interesting, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks to everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching. I will just share my screen. Yeah, thanks for watching again on quite an early morning for those in the UK. We have some more webinars coming up this week. We have one on Wednesday at 3 p.m. with Joanna, who is going to be talking about reef manta rays in the Maldives and her research into how they move with the monsoons, which is going to be quite interesting. And then we have one on Friday. It's another early start at 9 a.m. with Asia Haynes, who's in Australia as well. And she's going to be talking about Australian manta rays, including the pink manta. So I hope you guys have seen pictures of that because it's pretty cool. As always, you can find out more information about our webinars and about manta rays on our website and our social media pages. And we would love you to support our research initiatives. You can do that by joining the Cyclone or adopting a manta. And there's plenty more ways that you can help on the website as well. And thank you if you do choose to do any of those things. Okay, thanks very much, Isabel.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.